What's up everyone, how are you doing today? It's Hanger Roleplay, and today I wanna thorough craft a bit about different elements, different runes of Impale for Demon Hunter. I've gotten a comment on Reddit recently, and then the guy wrote that whatever rune you use doesn't fucking matter because you can go with everything, just go with whatever better gear you have there. If you have the physical, like quiver and physical, everything ancient, you go with physical or whatever. It's not correctly to assume that if you just have the best gear, you go with that rune, because every rune is completely different and serves completely different purpose there. Absolutely. Let's talk with the lightning first. Lightning is the rune that I personally use for the speed farming. For it's very effective in the early game, like Torment 13 to the Great Rift around 80. It's very effective. Why it's so effective? The knife ricochets to 2 additional enemies within 20 yards of each other. Basically, that works like a blast shield. It's after aiming, it always ricochets, it always hits something. And this is why it refills hatred so good. It's a guaranteed hit, and it's also incredibly strong against single target because it always hits something. This is why it's so good. And even though it doesn't really add any kind of additional damage out there, it still kind of adds up a bit of an area damage, and it still adds a bit of guaranteed hatred regeneration. That's why it's so incredibly effective. Now, why there is cold in the end game? Cold provides us the piercing. The knife pierces through all enemies in a straight line for cold damage. This is incredibly strong because it generates tremendous amount of area damage procs, and if you scale a ton of area damage on your gear, you will completely benefit from massive area damage procs. And look at this. The 2-piece bonus, while equipped with a melee weapon, your damage is increased by 1,200%. And this corresponds to all damage, not just the first hit damage, but all damage. And if you pierce through the whole fucking screen, they all get 1,200 damage there. And look at the 6-piece bonus here. Impale deals an additional 40,000 weapon damage to the first enemy's hit. And basically, the first enemy hit, that is the closest enemy that is being hit by the Impale, he gets tremendous amount of damage. That's what allows the Impale to be the killer of elites and the killer of the Rift Guardians so effectively. But this also, pierces through, and when you hit the first enemy with 40,000, it still procs area damage. And with Holy Point Shot, it still gives us 3 more knives, and all this hits for 40,000 damage and does tremendous amount of single target damage. And like I said, all this piercing creates an overlapping amount of area damage hits, and even though the enemies far behind, they do not get, they might not get, that 40,000 weapon damage, area damage hit, they will still get 1,200 damage, and the scaled area damage proc with it within the 10-yard radius. That's why it's still incredibly impressive, and that's why cold is so good, because it just scales with area damage better. Now let's take a look at the fire. I heard that people are using the fire rune in groups to kill the Rift Guardians, and at first, fire rune, it looks amazingly strong. Look at the number here. I mean, at cold we had 23 billion here, 23 billion, and with the fire we have 39 billion. That's almost twice the amount of damage here, and this is an average damage per second there that D3 Planet calculates. But here goes another trick, guys. The chemical burn rune. The enemy also burns for 500 weapon damage as fire over 2 seconds. But here goes the trick. There is a problem with this, because it's a damage over time. The damage is not instant. And another big problem is that we do 3 attacks per second, and the damage over time, it doesn't stack. It completely overlaps and overwrites itself. And let's just calculate this, assuming that we do 500 for 2 seconds, we will do 250% weapon damage over 1 second. If we divide that number by the amount of attacks that we do per second, and basically we divide 250 by 3 attacks, we do around 83 weapon damage of chemical burn with every attack, and then it's kind of overrides itself. So the number here should be like around maybe, you know, 25, 26 billion instead of 20, 23 for cold. So just a little better. But it's not this, it's not even fucking close to this number. This is like hypothetical number, you know, theoretical number, but in reality it simply will not happen because it's a raw damage that will never happen in the game, unfortunately. It only will happen if we hit once and then wait for 2 seconds for all the dots to completely expire on the same enemy. I think that, you know, in kind of very early levels it can be potentially very good. Like with the lightning rune, for example, it can be very good and it can be very strong. And in early rift farming can be very strong, I think. But in the late end game it's simply not possible because we will continuously attack the same mob over and over again, and will completely override all these burns over and over again, and they will not even expire. So I think that fire has potential for, you know, lower grift farming, but the end game I think it's not very good. Now let's take a look at the physical, and here goes the most interesting information here. Now there's also another physical rune here called Impact, and it causes knockback and has a 100% chance to stun the enemy for over a second. I think it has potential for hardcore because it completely procs strong arms all the time, and if you do Ancient Path Defenders, it will also generate tremendous amount of stuns and gives an additional amount of basically toughness. If you switch from strong arms to Ancient Path Defenders, you will just get additional toughness here. That's the deal. But unfortunately Impact Rune does not provide any kind of other source of additional damage, but the Grievous Wounds ones do. And this rune, it critical hits deal 330% additional damage, and this is where interesting fact appears, because this is not a damage over time, this is instant hit, and it's instant damage. When we do critical hits and will Impale, we will most likely critical hit almost entirely because our critical hit chance will be around 60%. With this rune we will just, you know, almost entirely do this additional damage throughout the whole rift. That's why I think that the Grievous Wounds has the most potential for single target against all runes. It's a guaranteed hit, it almost entirely critically hits all the time, so this damage here is pretty impressive. 36 billion here compared to the, you know, lightning, which is 23, and also the cold is 23 here. So the physical rune here does tremendously more damage. It's around 35% more damage here. And it's an instant damage, like I said, it always hits, it always applies immediately. There's no need to wait, it doesn't override or refreshes itself or whatever. It's instant damage, that's why it's so impressively good. So let's summarize a bit, guys. I think that lightning and fire rune are extremely good for speed farming. Cold rune is very good for end game push because it procs area damage like crazy. And for single target and for group play, especially when Demon Hunter is an elite killer, I think that Grievous Wounds will be absolutely the best rune out of all, simply because it does tremendous amount of damage. 30% more damage than any other rune available for the Demon Hunter Impale. Thanks for watching and see you soon!